Sustainable Woodstock is a not-for-profit community and environmental action and education organization. We encourage peoples of diverse backgrounds and from all walks of life to incorporate wise environmental, economic, and socially responsible practices into their daily lives. Our vision promotes vibrant, inclusive, thriving communities where we live sustainably now and in the future. We believe strongly that the intersection of a climate crisis and the movement for racial equity has made the connection between social justice and environmental stewardship clear and present. And my name is Michael Caduta. I'm the Executive Director of Sustainable Woodstock, and our Program Director and guru for the film series is Ginevra Wetmore, and she's going to talk a little bit about the film series itself. Ginevra?
Thanks, Michael. Hello to everyone who's coming in and joining us now. Why don't you just make sure you admit folks as they come in, Michael, while I'm looking at the other screen. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ginevra. I'm the Program Director at Sustainable Woodstock. You've come to a Q&A with Paul Watson alongside a free screening of the film Watson. And this is part of our monthly film series that we host with Pentangle Arts, our partner in this. It's a monthly screening of films and documentaries focused on climate change, sustainability. We do this as a way to foster a broader awareness of the really wide-ranging issues that impact our planet and our future. Some films, like this one, are followed by a panel discussion or Q&A with producers or relevant figures to explore issues that were presented in the film and to share ways that we as communities and individuals can engage in becoming part of the solution to the problems that we're faced with. So this series is made possible by our underwriters, the Vermont Community Foundation and Mascoma Bank, and our sponsors, LOA Group, The Unicorn, Yankee Bookshop, and Mark Knott DDS. That's our film series. And I'm going to copy paste right now a link to, there we go. Okay. This is a link where you can take a look and purchase books written by Captain Paul Watson, who's joining us tonight. So I will also send that in a follow-up email to this event, but if you'd like to open it right now, please feel free. Right now, anyone joining us, welcome new folks. Right now you are muted, so you should not be able to unmute yourself if I've done this correctly. So we are also recording this event. Double check, yeah. So you're muted. Any questions that you have during the presentation, we ask that you type them into the chat box on Zoom. If you're unfamiliar with Zoom, you'll want to run your cursor over the screen. You should see the chat option. If you don't, you'll see an option that says ... more. If you click that, that should let you select chat, and then you can type questions or comments into the chat box, and Michael and myself will pose those questions to Paul Watson. And I'm also just going to throw out again the fact that we are recording this. There is a chance, a possibility that if your camera is on right now, that you could end up somehow possibly in the recording of this event. If you do not want that, please go ahead and turn your camera off. It's in the bottom left-hand corner. It says stop video. So turn your camera off if you're concerned about that. And once again, type any questions or comments into the chat on Zoom. I think those are all my logistics.
Okay, thanks, Ginevra. So it's a pleasure and an honor to introduce Captain Paul Watson. Captain Watson is that rare individual whose life challenges us to consider what we are willing to do to preserve the wondrous life forms with whom we share this planet. He's a marine wildlife conservation and environmental activist. Watson was one of the founding members and directors of Greenpeace. In 1977, he left Greenpeace and founded the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. A renowned speaker, accomplished author, master mariner, and lifelong environmentalist, Captain Watson has been awarded many honors for his dedication to the oceans and to the planet. Among the many commendations for his work, he received the Genesis Award for Lifetime Achievement in 1998, was named as one of the top 20 environmental heroes of the 20th century by Time magazine in 2000, and was inducted into the U.S. Animal Rights Hall of Fame in Washington, D.C. in 2002. He was also awarded the Amazon Peace Prize by the President of Ecuador in 2007. And in 2012, Captain Watson became only the second person after Captain Jacques Cousteau to be awarded the Jules Verne Award, dedicated to environmentalists and adventurers. In 2022, Captain Paul Watson continues his fight for marine wildlife conservation with the new Captain Paul Watson Foundation. And now, Captain Watson.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
And I hope that people enjoyed the film. Leslie Chilcott, who did the film, did a wonderful job. She did Inconvenient Truth with Vice President Al Gore. And when she approached me about doing the film and having seen Inconvenient Truth, I said, yeah, I'd certainly love to have her do the project. And she did it and did it extremely well. So we're certainly quite happy with it. The underwater footage, the humpbacks, she took herself in the waters around Tonga, and did a wonderful job of doing that also. So I'll just briefly, I guess, give a background or a brief history of where I came from and why I'm doing what I'm doing. 60 years ago, I was raised in a fishing village in Eastern Canada, St. Andrews, New Brunswick. And I spent a summer swimming with a family of beavers and had a great time. It was just me and the beavers. And the next summer when I went back, I couldn't find them. I couldn't find them anywhere. I began to ask questions and found out trappers had taken them over the winter time. And that made me quite angry. And so that winter, I began to walk the trap lines to release animals from the traps and to destroy the traps. Admittedly, I got in a bit of trouble, but I did save quite a few animals. I was quite happy about that. Then later, when I was about 17, I ran off to sea. I was with the Norwegian Merchant Marine. I was with the Canadian Coast Guard. That's where I got my sea experience. But in 1969, there was a demonstration at the border of British Columbia and Washington State against nuclear testing in the Aleutian Islands, on the island of Amchitka specifically. And out of that demonstration, which two groups got together, the Sierra Club and the Quakers. And out of those two groups, we formed a group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee, because people were still remembered the tsunami from the Anchorage earthquake of the early 60s that hit both Vancouver Island and Hawaii. And the Don't Make a Wave Committee's idea was, we took an idea from the Quakers, who had sailed a vessel down to Bikini Atoll in '56 to protest nuclear testing there. So we decided to get a boat and do the same thing, sail up to Amchitka and protest the bomb. And at one of the early meetings, somebody left and flashed a peace sign, and Bill Darnell said, make it a Greenpeace. And Bob Hunter said, great name for the boat. So that was a Greenpeace boat. So the Greenpeace boat came first. And then in '72, after that campaign, we changed the name to the Greenpeace Foundation. And I was a founding director of the Greenpeace Foundation, also the leader of the SEAL campaigns, first mate on the whale campaigns, all the early days. But I got very, very frustrated because, we were hanging banners, taking pictures, and that's great. But, I didn't like watching whales die. I didn't like seeing seals being clubbed to death. And there was a incident that took place in '77, which was considered controversial by Greenpeace, because as the leader for the SEAL campaign, I saw a sealer about to club a baby seal, and I ran forward and I grabbed the club from his hand and I threw it in the water and picked up the seal and took it to safety. And later, the Greenpeace board of directors censored me for that, said that I accused me of theft and vandalism, stealing the man's club and destroying it. And I said, well, I was there to save that seal's life and didn't hurt anybody. So if I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again. And they said, well, that's a violation of Greenpeace's principles on nonviolence. I said, well, I think it's about time for a change. So that's why I came up with a new strategy, which I called at the time aggressive nonviolence. We're going to aggressively intervene. And that's what I set Sea Shepherd up to do, to aggressively intervene, not to hurt anybody, but to harass, to blockade, to intercept, to do what we can to save lives. And that might involve destroying property, which is used for illegal activities, but I don't see anything wrong with that. So in 1979, I got my first ship thanks to the Fund for Animals and the RSPCA in England. And our first job was to go out and protect seals on the east coast of Canada, which we did. and got in trouble for it, of course. But in July of '79, I hunted down a pirate whaling ship called the Sierra. And this ship was notorious for killing anything it could, anywhere. It was condemned by the International Whaling Commission. It was considered a criminal operation. So I set out to find it and set off across the Atlantic Ocean and found it 200 miles off the coast of Portugal and began to chase it. I chased it into a Portuguese port. I didn't want to take any action on the high seas because that might have jeopardized people's lives. So in port, there were 20 of us on board. And I said to my crew, I can't say you're not going to get hurt, but I can guarantee you're going to go to jail in Portugal for what we're about to do. And that is, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to ram that ship and I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to end its career. And 10 minutes later, there was 17 of the crew on the dock and three on board. And the 2 that stayed with me, fortunately, were engineers. So we pulled away from the dock, crossed the bay. I hit the Sierra in the bow to destroy the harpoon, did a 360, came in and rammed it and ripped it open to the water line. It never killed another whale after that. But we were pursued by the Portuguese Navy and brought in, and I was brought before the port captain of Porto in Portugal, and I was accused of gross criminal negligence. And I said, well, there wasn't anything negligent about it. I mean, we hit the ship exactly where we intended to hit it. It wasn't negligent. And the port captain sort of laughed at that. And he said, well, I really don't know who owns that ship. They won't come forward. So until I do, you're free to go. So we got away with that. And that began our campaign to hunt down and shut down all of the illegal pirate whaling vessels in the Atlantic. We shut down the Susan Teresa in South Africa, also the Cape Fisher in the Canary Islands, and sank half of the Spanish fleet in Porto Vigo. In '86, we sank half of the Icelandic whaling fleet and destroyed their whale processing plant. Now that might seem illegal, but I asked them if there were any charges. They didn't respond. So in January of '88, I flew to Reykjavik to demand that they lay charges. And I was met at the airport by numerous police officers and a chief immigration officer. And the chief immigration officer said, well, how long do you intend to stay in Iceland? I said, well, I don't know, 2 days, 2 years, 5 years. I don't know, it's up to you. And then they brought me in for interrogation and said, are you admitting to sinking these ships? I said, you know, we sunk them. We're going to sink the other 2 at the first opportunity. And the next morning, I was escorted to the airport, put on a plane, sent back to the US. And the Minister of Justice stood up in the House that morning. He said, who does he think he is? He comes into our country and demands to be arrested. Get him out of here. They knew that to put me on trial would have been to put themselves on trial for their illegal whaling activities. So there was no criminal activity because they didn't charge us with anything. So that's what we've been doing over the years. And we've never been convicted of any felony during that time. We've been to court. We've won the court cases on civil charges. But that was the approach, to intervene aggressively and to shut down these illegal operations. And of course, we get called kind of a lot of names over there. I mean, I remember I was on the Bill Maher show, and he said, well, people call you an eco-terrorist. And I said, well, I've never worked for Monsanto, so I don't think I'm an eco-terrorist. And never, like I said, we never injured anybody at all. And so Sea Shepherd grew, and in the 2007, we started a television show, Whale Wars, with Animal Planet, which made us very popular, got us a lot of support. And I think that was a problem because the organization grew, it got more money, there were people getting jobs and everything. And in June of 2022, I was pretty much marginalized from the operation. And they changed the direction of where Sea Shepherd was going, from being an interventionist group using aggressive nonviolence to we wanted to be scientific, work in partnership with companies, work in partnership with governments. And I said, no, I can't participate in that. I don't want to support that. That's not what I set Sea Shepherd up to be. The response was that I was told I was an employee and to do what I was told or else. So I resigned. And then I was dismissed from the global board, and now it's a big problem. Sea Shepherd US, which is based out of Vermont, right, is actually taking me to court in Vermont, saying I don't have the right to use the logo or the name, which is fine because I haven't been using the logo or the name, but they want to make it so I can't use my own name. claiming that they own the rights to my name. And so that's the situation we're in now. So I'm just ignoring that all because I've never felt more inspired or more motivated in my life than I do right now. I set up this foundation to continue to do the work that we've done over the last 50 years, and I intend to do that. We secured our first ship. It's in the United Kingdom right now, being ready. And in June, we set off to intercept the Icelandic whalers again. And they intend to kill up to 200 endangered fin whales, and we intend to stop them. So that's what my motivation is right now. And longer term is want to be ready for the Southern Ocean, because Japan will be returning to the Southern Ocean to resume their illegal whaling operations in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. And when they do, we want to be down there with 2 ships or more to intervene and stop them from doing that. Protecting whales has been a lifelong, effort for me, and there's a very good reason for that. In 1975, when I was with Greenpeace, we had come up with this idea to protect whales by putting our bodies between the whales and the harpoons. And we were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time. We thought that was going to work. And then in June of 75, I found myself in a small boat with Robert Hunter in front of a Soviet harpoon vessel in the North Pacific, bearing down on 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner tried to take a shot, I would maneuver the small boat between the harpoon and the whale. And that worked for about 25 minutes until the captain on the harpoon vessel came running down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner. And then he looked down on us, smiled, and brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, a horrendous explosion. This harpoon flew over our head, slammed into the backside of one of the whales in the pod. A female, she rolled on her side, she screamed, there was blood everywhere. And suddenly the largest whale in that pod rose up, then slapped the water with his tail and dove and swam right underneath of us and threw himself straight at the bow of the harpoon vessel that was behind us. But they were ready for him with an unattached harpoon. And the harpooner fired and struck the whale point blank right in the head. He fell back in the water, thrashing about in agony, blood everywhere. And as he was thrashing about, I saw his eye, and he dove again. And this time I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight towards us real fast. And he came up and out of the water at an angle that the next move was to come right down on top of us, to crash right down on top of us. And as his head rose up out of the water, and as I looked into his eye, an eye the size of my fist, so close I could see my own reflection in that eye, I saw something there that changed my life forever. And what I saw was understanding. That whale understood what we were trying to do. I could see the effort he made to pull himself back. He began to slide back into the sea. I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. Could have killed us, chose not to do so. So I owe my life to that whale making that decision. But I also saw something else in that eye, and it was pity, and not for himself, but for us. Why were we taking his life? Why were we killing the whales? They didn't eat them. The Soviets killed them for oil, spermaceti oil, sperm oil, which was highly prized for heat-resistant lubricating oil. And one of the things that was very highly prized was for the construction and maintenance of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are, killing these incredibly beautiful, intelligent, socially complex, self-aware, sentient beings for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me. We're insane. Ecologically, we're certainly insane. And I said at that time, I'm going to do everything I can in my life to protect them. That's what will be my purpose. So when we sank half that Icelandic whaling fleet in '86, I had a former colleague from Greenpeace come over, and he said, it was at the International Whaling Commission. He said, I just want to let you know that what you did in Iceland was reprehensible and irresponsible. And I said, yeah, so what? He said, well, aren't you concerned about what people think about you? I said, no, not really. We didn't sink those whaling ships for you or for Greenpeace or for any person on the planet, really. We sunk them for the whales, John. Find me a whale that disagreed with what we did, and I promise you we won't do it again. And so that's always been our motivation. Our clients are those species that live in the ocean. Protecting our ocean, I think, is probably the most important thing that we can address, because without the ocean, we don't live on this planet. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton in the sea. And phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. If phytoplankton goes extinct in the ocean, we die. Life on this planet is going to be severely reduced. It'll be a major, major extinction event. For the most part, people aren't even aware of phytoplankton, but phytoplankton is the foundation for life on this planet. And that's why I say when the ocean dies, we all die. For the simple fact is we are the ocean. When people think of the ocean, they usually think of the sea, of course. But what is the ocean? It's a planet. It's a planet of water and continuous circulation. Sometimes it's in the sea, sometimes locked in ice, sometimes underground, sometimes in the atmosphere, sometimes in the cells of every plant and animal on the planet. Water flowing through all of those mediums. So the water in our bodies now was once in ice, once in the sea, once in the clouds, once in the bodies of other plants and animals. So we are the ocean. And it's all interconnected, and all those species are interconnected because there's three basic laws of ecology. The first is the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. The second is the law of interdependence, that all species are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth because there's a limit to carrying capacity. And when one species steals the carrying capacity of all the others, that causes diminishment of diversity and interdependence, which leads to ecological collapse. We do not live on this planet alone. A few years ago, I had a reporter from the Fox network, Brett Hume. He called me up and he said, did you say that worms, trees, fish, and whales are more important than people? And I said, yes, I think I did say that. And he said, how could you say something so outrageous as to say worms, bees, trees, and whales are more important than people? Well, because they're more important than people, because they can live here without us, but we cannot live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. So we have to understand that our survival on this planet is interconnected and interdependent with all of those other species. If you look at it this way, is the planet is a spaceship. It's on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy. And every spaceship has a life support system. And that life support system provides us with the food we eat, the air we breathe, and regulates climate and temperature. And that life support system is maintained and operated by a crew of engineers. Those engineers are the species that make it work. Everything from the worms to the trees to the bacterium up to the great whales and everything. Humans are not really engineers. We're more passengers on spaceship Earth, having a wonderful time amusing ourselves. But what we are doing is we're murdering engineers. We're killing off the engineers. And there's only so many engineers you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart. And that's in fact in the process of happening right now. And we have to understand that our survival depends upon a biocentric point of view. That is the understanding that we need all of those other species, and we have to learn to live in harmony with them and to value them. And right now we're overfishing the ocean. There is no real sustainable fishery anywhere in the world. We're destroying the rainforests all around the world. We're destroying coral reefs and everything. And we really should be far more passionate about the defense of these ecosystems. Humans have this incredible ability to adapt to diminishment, and that might have served us well 10,000 years ago. But what happens now is as we lose things, as species disappear, as ecosystems are diminished, we simply adapt to it, accept it, and just move on. Species go extinct. We forget they were there. I mean, we forget on the eastern seaboard of the United States, there used to be beluga whales in Long Island Sound. There used to be walrus on the coast of Maine. Gone is the sea mink, the Labrador duck, the eastern bison, all gone extinct, and we forget that they were even there. We adapt to things like, for instance, if it was the 1960s and I were to say, in 40 years, you're going to be buying water in a plastic bottle and paying more for that water than the equivalent amount of gasoline, you would have looked at me like I'm an idiot. Nobody's going to do that. But here we are. We adapted to that diminishment. We've adapted to the fact that our oceans are polluted with plastics and everything. And we've got to change that point of view. We've got to understand that we have to adopt a more interconnected point of view if we're going to survive. You know, a lot of people say that, you know, we talk about sustainable fisheries. There is no sustainable fisheries. Sustainable logging, there's no sustainable logging. Too many people taking too many things. It's not sustainable. Sustainability actually has become a word for business as usual in many places. I mean, we even have the so-called sustainable toothfish or Chilean sea bass industry, yet it's an endangered species. How could it possibly be sustainable if it's endangered? It's become sort of a label, and that's really sad because it's losing, you know, an understanding of what sustainability is really all about. So I set up the Captain Paul Watson Foundation after being removed from Sea Shepherd because, first of all, I used my name because I figured that, well, they can't take that away from me, but I'm finding out that I'm actually being sued for the right to use my name. But it simply was set up to carry on the work that we've been doing for the last 50 years, and that is direct intervention on the high seas against primarily illegal activities, which we continue to do. And there's a lot to do yet. I've said when I was very young that it was my lifelong ambition to eradicate the perversion of whaling, to remove whaling as an occupation completely. And we made a lot of progress over the years. Since we began, we've shut down Australia's whaling, Spain's whaling, Chile and Peru and South Africa. We drove the Japanese, at least for now, out of the Southern Ocean whale sanctuary. And we made a lot of progress. And as of 3 years ago, for the first time, there were no whaling taking place in international waters, at least up until now. And so a lot of progress, but that is my ambition, even though I'm 72 now, my ambition is to see a world without whaling. And that's what I'm working for. And I want to make sure that our children and children's children have a world with whales in it, and of course with all the other species that are so important that they not be driven extinct. Right now, we're probably looking at a future without the vaquita. We're probably looking at a future without so many species that we now just take for granted. And when they're gone, they're gone. And so that's what motivates me. That's what inspires me, and that's what drives me. And I have to say that when setting up the foundation, as so many veterans from the Sea Shepherd days have come over to be part of it, to work with me and to carry forward. So I won't be going to sea with strangers. I'll be going to sea with people that I've worked with for many years. And that gives me a lot of encouragement. So thank you. I can take questions now if you like.
Thank you so much, Captain Watson. Michael and I are hopping back on here. I know some folks joined us while you were presenting here, so I'm just going to reiterate that anyone who joined us, you are muted. So if you have questions or comments, as some people have already started to do, please do type them into the chat on Zoom. If you run your cursor over the screen, it should show up. Otherwise, hit the More, M-O-R-E button, and chat should be an option. So please submit your comments and questions there. And I see some are coming directly to me, Michael. It looks like a direct message rather than to everyone. So you might not be able to see all those, but
Okay.
yeah. So that's okay though. And we can go ahead and pose some of those questions.
Sounds good.
All right.
So I start then. So thank you, Captain Paul. Especially appreciated your comments about diminishment. I've often thought that we don't really miss the things that we've never known. And our children in future generations will have the same experience. The first question here is, in my planned giving, I would like to leave behind physical gift for Captain Paul Watson Foundation and also as a beneficiary on some accounts. How should I do this? Address and tax ID/EIN. So Captain Paul, how would you advise this individual?
I think the best thing to go to our website, which is paulwatsonfoundation.org.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. This next one, I think only I can see, Michael. Is it possible to actually go to Canada where the seal hunt is happening and protest it? Do any animal activist groups still do this?
That's a complicated problem because the commercial seal hunt has virtually been shut down after a lot of pressure over a lot of years. There's really no commercial market. In 2008, the European Parliament banned seal products that have been banned in Russia and China and other places. The seal hunt in Canada continues because of a $20 million subsidy from the federal government to get people to go out there and kill seals, even though there's no market for it at all. One of the reasons that we haven't gone back to intervene is because the Canadian government would love nothing better than for us to go back and intervene, because that would arouse all sorts of nationalism and everything, and make it a lot easier. So we're letting it, it's a dying industry, and we're letting it die. The government has set up a quota of 450,000 seals to be killed, but they don't kill that many. They kill about 40,000. Because there's just no market. So what's the point of doing it? So it's more of a welfare scheme for sealers than anything else. And I believe in a couple of years, it'll be gone completely. And the real problem that's facing harp seals, hood seals, and that is the diminishment of ice. And the harp seals have their the pups are born on the ice and everything. And if the ice isn't there, then they're born in the water and they drown, or they're it's a very difficult thing. So that's the real threat facing the seal populations today, is climate change.
So there's two here, a question, and before that, just a thank you for screening the film. It was an excellent documentary, and I was in awe and very moved while watching Captain Paul Watson's story. Thank you, Captain. The film was great overall. You have been forced out of most of the organizations that you've been a part of or started. How do you hope with your new Paul Watson Foundation will be able to continue to do what you really believe in, aggressive nonviolence? Also, from your book, you did several actions with Native Americans. Have you done more recently with any groups, or do you wish to? If not, why not?
We continue to work with the tribes in Amazonia. We have a project down there protecting river dolphins, and I've worked very closely over the years with Chief Raoni of the Yanomami, and also with the late Paulina Payakan of the Kayapo, to stop dam projects there and to protect the Amazon. But over the years, we've worked closely with groups like the Mohawks, the Maori in New Zealand, Australian Aboriginals, with the tribes in British Columbia to oppose salmon farms and things like that. The great thing about indigenous cultures is that they have this biocentric approach that is one of the things I've been trying to encourage. And that is this understanding that everything is linked, everything is interdependent. And there's a lot to learn from that perspective. So we will continue to work with indigenous peoples wherever and whenever we can, and to, more importantly, to learn from them wherever and whatever we can.
Thank you. There's this is a multi-part question. The last part of it is how satisfying was it to bring down the thunder?
I don't know if it was satisfying. I mean, it was something that had to be done. It was the longest pursuit of a poacher in maritime history, 110-day pursuit from the Southern Ocean to equatorial West Africa. The Thunder captain sank his own ship in order to destroy the evidence, but the crew were able to board the sinking ship and get that evidence. And he got, 3 years in prison in Sao Tome. He and two other officers who were convicted were not convicted for what they were doing. They were convicted for sinking their ship in Sao Tome waters. The company was fined 17 million euros but it's a Spanish company in Galicia, but the Spanish courts said, well, we don't have any jurisdiction. So really, nobody was ever penalized for the actual illegal fishing on that. But we did end its career, as well as 5 other Patagonia toothfish operations, Antarctic toothfish operations in the Southern Ocean. But, poachers, you just remove the one and another one moves into its place and everything, because it's incredible amount of money to be made from going after endangered species like Antarctic toothfish. The Thunder alone was said to have made $60 million in profits during its time. And so it's, as long as that temptation is out there, there will be poachers. And unfortunately, scarcity translates into more demand, which translates into higher prices. So there's so much money to be made from going after endangered species. I call it the economics of extinction. And we got to get rid of industrialized heavy gear technologies, 100-mile long lines, 100-mile long gill nets, giant purse seine nets, super trawlers, these things. The net that we pulled out of the Southern Ocean from 2 kilometers deep was 72 kilometers long and weighed 70 tons. That was one net from one ship. And this is a kind of technology which is destroying life in our ocean.
The next is a sharing. Just love the documentary. Are there any plans to make more documentaries with your foundation?
Well, what we plan to do is do a new version of Whale Wars, carry on from what we did with the Whale Wars on Animal Planet. So we will be doing a television series. There's also a motion picture being made and that kind of thing. It's all really good stuff. I've always said that the most powerful weapon on the planet is the camera. And if it isn't on camera, it might as well not have happened. So we make sure that we have documentary film crews covering everything what we do.
Thank you. This question is, which mission did you feel was the most dangerous?
Yeah, I really can't say. I mean, there's been dangers in a lot of the missions. I mean, not just from the confrontations, but also from, I mean, we go through some horrendous storms in the Southern Ocean or off the coast of Labrador. I would say, personally, to me, the most dangerous missions were the SEAL campaigns, where we were literally beaten and thrown into ice water and, you know, dragged through through ice water, threatened. Those were probably the most dangerous missions to me, was the Canadian SEAL Hunt campaigns.
Thank you. So the next question is, thank you. And this talk and the documentary were moving and upsetting, as well as motivating. What can we do today to help?
Well, I think everybody should just be aware of what their ecological footprint is, what they eat, what they consume, how you can make a difference in just little ways, really, and to just be ecologically aware. I would suggest that, you know, we did the film Seaspiracy, for instance, and we advocate that nobody eat seafood or fish from the ocean because there's simply too many people and not enough fish. And if you have to do it, just make it as shallow ecological footprint as you possibly can. But of course, also from our point of view, if you want to support us, you can go to our website and join us on our missions against poachers.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the ocean cleanup project going on, both preventing and removing plastic from the ocean?
Well, I'm all for ocean cleanup, both preventing and removing plastic. It's all a good thing. And there's a lot of organizations that are involved in that. And but there's so much out there. You know, I remember a time when you could walk the beach and there wasn't a single piece of plastic on a beach to be found because plastic just wasn't there. Fish floats that we found were made of glass and that. And so a lot has changed in just, you know, in the last century. And but we need more and more of those groups to do it. Plastic is a major problem. It shouldn't even be allowed to be produced, especially single-use plastic shouldn't be allowed to be produced. And as long as it's being produced, it's going to end up in landfills, it's going to end up in the ocean or rivers or whatever. So it's a major problem.
Thank you. The next comment is, hi, Captain Watson. I have followed your story since I was 7. When I discovered Whale Wars on Animal Planet. To reach your goals, what is needed the most?
Well, meaning our personal goals with the foundation, what is needed the most? Well, that's very easy to say, money. You know, we'd like to build up a monthly donor program so that can sustain our operations going forward and not have to and make us secure in doing so. But what is really needed the most is people to really apply themselves. What is your passion? What are you passionate about? And what can you do about it? And I think that every individual has the ability to really make change. And whether that approach is litigation, legislation, education, or direct intervention, it's all the same. So the thing that I just encourage people is find out something that you're really passionate about and use your skills and ability to make a difference. And you can make a difference. One person can make an incredible difference. Because of Diane Fossey, we still have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Because of David Wingate, we still have Bermuda storm petrels in Bermuda. Look what somebody like Greta Thunberg's been able to accomplish. I mean, one individual can make an incredible change if they just apply themselves through the virtues of courage, passion, and imagination. And so I'd just like to see more and more people doing that.
Thank you.
We Are the Ocean is an amazing book for kids. Has the captain, you, considered authorizing a picture book biography?
Haven't thought about it, but it's a good idea. Let's take a look into that.
And next question, what's the best way to support LAMYA Essential? Direct donations to the Captain Paul Watson Foundation or through Sea Shepherd France? I'm not sure if she was removed from the latter or not. I'm not sure.
It's a complicated situation as this Sea Shepherd France, Sea Shepherd UK, and Sea Shepherd Brazil are continuing to do the work that we've always done. Sea Shepherd Global now is suing Sea Shepherd France, saying they don't have a right to use the logo or the name. Sea Shepherd USA is suing me and Sea Shepherd Origins. It's ridiculous. We're not suing anybody, but they're suing us to try and gain control of something they did not create and did not build up, which is actually, I find, has happened a lot to a lot of other organizations and companies too. Look what happened with Steve Jobs. You know, he got fired from Apple, for instance. The problem is that we were so busy doing what we were doing that we didn't see the people coming in who were doing all the maneuvering and manipulation to take control. And once they got control, the focus was on merchandising, marketing, and fundraising, and doing less and less in order to make more and more money. Money's always a big corrupter on these things. That's why I've always said big organizations are always a problem, and you know, you got to keep it small. So although the people who took over Sea Shepherd control the assets and the support list and all the bequests that would come up over the years and everything, and they have all that, what they don't have is the motivation, the inspiration, and the passion to do what we have to do. I don't really need the name. I don't really need the logo and everything. But what I do need and what I do have are so many passionate people who are coming and rallying to us to continue the work that we're doing. We've literally gotten hundreds of volunteer crew applications, and as people find out what's happening, they're coming over and supporting us financially as supporters. And that's the more monthly donors that we get, the stronger we can become and the more we can do. So it's a process of building up what we lost, but I'm quite confident that we'll be able to do it. Either way, I feel much more happier and comfortable with the fact that I will be able to continue to do what I'm doing. Because in the last few years, I was told I couldn't post things, I couldn't do interviews, I couldn't do that. My history was an embarrassment to the organization. I was too controversial, I was too confrontational. I said, well, yeah, but that's how this organization became so successful. Precisely those things that you're condemning me for. But anyway, that's where we're at. And Sea Shepherd France, I'm working very closely with Sea Shepherd France. Lamia Samlami, who's the president of Sea Shepherd France, is probably the most dynamic activist on the planet as far as the oceans are concerned. She's right now protecting dolphins in the Bay of Biscay, turtles on the island of Mayotte, sharks on La Reunion Island. So much she's doing in the Mediterranean. An incredible amount of work that she's doing. And she's been doing this with us for 20 years. And she's not about to be paid off or sidelined if she can help it. I was offered a lot of money to continue to be the figurehead of Sea Shepherd, which meant say nothing, do nothing, post nothing, shut up, and accept a paycheck. And I said, no, that's not what I set this group up for.
Thank you.
Our next question is, I love to travel, especially to coastal areas in different parts of the world. How can I ensure that the tourism I participate in is not indirectly or directly harmful to our animal friends?
Well, yeah, I think people, there's two types of travelers. There's tourists and there's travelers. Travelers tend to be have an ecological impact than tourism and that, but we do have to be very concerned about ecotourism, especially, you know, we spend a lot of time in the Galapagos, and the Galapagos is actually being ruined by ecotourism. You know, they're building ecotourist hotels, and they're going on, the boats are launching there. That means you got to bring in more food from the mainland. Let's bring in some cows because people like their steaks. Oh, we got to catch more fish to feed to the tourists and that. So when I first went to the Galapagos in 1999, the average number of people that came there every year as tourists is 50,000. The number of people that lived there was 45,000. Today, about 150,000 people live there and about 400,000 tourists come. So that's having an incredible impact. So there's an invasion of exotic species of insects that are coming in from the mainland because of that. And so we have to be very, very careful on the impact of ecotourism, as it's called. When we travel, we should travel lightly, live with the people who are in those areas, live like they do, don't demand to have the same luxuries that you have when you're at home, that kind of thing.
Thank you. What can you tell us about Japan's plans to return to whaling in the Southern Ocean Sanctuary?
What we know is that they're just, at the end of this year, they will complete construction of a $67 million factory ship. The only reason they would build a factory ship is to replace the Nishan Maru to go to the Southern Ocean. You don't need a factory ship to do offshore whaling off of Japan. And this year, there's two harpoon vessels are down in the Southern Ocean, Japanese harpoon vessels, doing what they call non-lethal research, which is whale spotting, just to see how many whales it can cover and where to go should they return. But the fact that they're completing the construction of this factory ship means to me that they intend to go back there. And they haven't said anything about it, but what's the point of building a ship like that if they don't? So we have to be, I don't want to react to them. I want to be there in anticipation. I want to meet them when they return. I want to be ready for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the Paul Watson Foundation have a ship or plan to obtain one?
Yes, we have. Our first ship is the John Paul de Joria, which was sponsored by John Paul de Joria. We're looking at, we have another sponsor to secure a second ship, and we have a vessel on the Amazon, which a river vessel for protecting the dolphins and that. And Sea Shepherd France is looking at securing another vessel too. So we're slowly building up the Navy. But our vessel, the John Paul de Joria, goes into dry dock this month to be cleaned and painted, and will be ready for campaigns by April. And the first campaign will be to Iceland.
Thank you. Next question is, can intervention be done in Taiji, Japan, to stop the cove dolphin slaughter?
The Taiji dolphin slaughter is very, very difficult because it is inside Japanese waters and they tightly control it. We had the Cove Guardian program where volunteers from around the world would go there, but Japan countered this by not allowing anybody who has ever been to Taiji to protest the dolphin kill to ever enter Japan again. So you're blacklisted from entering the country if you've ever protested against the Taiji hunt. Although the Dolphin Project with Rick O'Barry's continues to oppose it, there are Japanese activists who continue to oppose it. It is a difficult one because it is in Japan, and it's driven by the demand by sea aquariums around the world to get captive dolphins for amusement and for amusement parks, really, like SeaWorld, for example. What is needed here is some sort of law to ban the capture of these dolphins for the purpose of exhibiting them in dolphinariums and marine aquariums. You know, back in the 20s, 100 years ago, zoos used to go out and, for instance, if you wanted some gorillas, you go in, they machine gun the adults and take the babies, and that was acceptable practice. Not acceptable practice now, but it is when it comes to marine life. You go in, you kill hundreds of dolphins and select the few of them to go to the marine aquariums, and the rest of them are ground up into pig food or whatever. But the money is to be made. The money is being made from the sale of dolphins to marine aquariums. On the average, $250,000 per dolphin. That's what's driving this. So it's really up to the marine aquarium industry to shut it down, or the zoo industry to shut it down and to oppose it. But it's almost physically impossible for individuals to do much because there's heavy police guards there and heavy penalties. And if they even suspect that you're there to protect the dolphins, you'll be escorted out of the country. But unfortunately, the problem is that the dolphin hunt is actually the third worst episode, practice of this. The second one is the killing of dolphins and pilot whales in Faroe Islands. And the first, actually, strangely enough, is the killing of dolphins by the French fishing fleet in the Bay of Biscay, where more dolphins are killed there. And we're making progress on that. We've been taking the bodies of the dead dolphins and bringing them to the Eiffel Tower or to the main street in Nantes, and places like that to display them, getting people's attention. And we have gotten the attention of the government. And last week, one of the European ministers came out on the boat to witness what was going on, to see the dolphins being killed. The solution to this is really to change their practices. The killing of dolphins by the French fishing fleet is illegal. It's against French law and it's against EU law. So what we're trying to do is to enforce those laws by putting pressure on the politicians to do that. When it comes to fishermen, though, however, it's always difficult. I actually coined a phrase for this. I call it homopeshophobia, politicians' fear of fishermen. Nobody wants to get fishermen or farmers upset because that's a voting block. So, it's a hard one to get overcome.
Thank you.
How, as a tiny human, do I possibly impact such gloomy conditions? Your documentary is powerful and amazing, but also overwhelming in the sense of making a significant difference.
I think that each of us have the power to really do change. And I always say that the answer to an impossible problem is to find the impossible solution. And how do you do that? Through passion, imagination, and courage. 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa was unthinkable. It was impossible, and yet that impossibility became possible. And I like to see that can happen in so many things. And we've seen a lot of changes over the years of seemingly impossible problems that were solved. And they were solved because of individuals, not by governments, not by corporations, but by individuals who just had the determination and the imagination and the courage to actually do something about it. I mean, if a 16-year-old girl like Greta Thunberg can capture the world's attention over climate change, then any of us can do anything, really, if we just apply ourselves. And the one thing I do tell people is never allow anybody to deter you, to say it can't be done, to say it's all impossible to do. If you have a dream, then go for it, and just ignore every critic that comes in your direction, and just go for it. And it's amazing what can be done. And I've seen so many examples of people who've done such incredible work. Back in 1979, I had a 19-year-old crew member on board the ship when we went after the Sierra. And after the campaign, he said, "We got to do something about the treatment of laboratory animals, the way they're treated in the labs and how cruel it is." And I said, "Well, Sea Shepherd's not going to go into a laboratory to deal with this, but if you're so passionate about it, why don't you do something about it?" And he said, "Well, what the hell can I do? I'm just a 19-year-old kid." And I said, "Well, use your imagination, come up with an idea, a strategy, and go for it." And he did. He went back to Maryland, where he's from, got a job in the laboratory for a year, documented all the cruelty and everything that was happening in that laboratory for a year, then delivered it to the Washington Post and the television stations and shut the place down. But then he went on and he set up his own organization, which is now called People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. So it's a powerful, large organization set up by a 19-year-old kid who was given the power to understand that he could make a difference. That was Alex Pacheco, by the way.
Thank you. The next is more of observation and a question on the existential end of things. This Zoom reminds me of a book from Alexandra Morton, Listening to Whales, What the Orcas Have Taught Us. It seems humans are very near being able to know the words and thoughts of non-human sentient beings, such as orcas and other cetaceans. What do you think of an orca? What do you think an orca off the coast of British Columbia or a blue whale in Antarctica says? With the Japanese being so keen with technology, why not direct their research in translating whale song?
Alexandra Morton's done incredible work, especially when it comes to protecting salmon. So, we've been supporting her for many years from that. And we're actually trying to work on getting a movie made about her life. She's sort of like to salmon what Jane Goodall is to chimpanzees, really. So, yeah, we're certainly supporting her. But I don't know what whales think, but I do know they think. They're highly intelligent creatures. I know they communicate with each other. I've had very close encounters with many species of whales, and I even rode an orca off the Straits of Bella Bella back in '75, which was incredible because we were in the water with this oncoming pod of orcas. And just, we're here to relate with the whales and everything. That's going to be neat. But when you see an oncoming pod of orcas and the only thing about you is your head above the water and you're floating there, your perspective changes pretty easily. And the first thought that came to mind was, these guys eat sea lions and they're bigger than us. And so then they all disappeared. Now that's even worse. Now you don't know where they are. And the pod surfaced right beside us, so close. I reached out, I grabbed the dorsal fin of the orca that was there. I don't know why I did it. Next thing I know, I'm being pulled through the water, and boom, I tumbled off behind him and I'm left in his wake. But you don't go up to a lion in the Serengeti and pet it. But here, the most powerful predator on the planet allowed me to just ride along with him. And that, I think that the reason orcas, and no orca in the wild has ever attacked or killed a human being. And the reason for that is I think that they understand how dangerous we are. They have that intelligence enough to understand how dangerous we are, and they've chosen coexistence rather than, competition. And of course, when we're dealing with other species, we're dealing with intelligences that we don't understand. We're conditioned to understand intelligence by hand-to-eye coordination, the ability to use tools. If a blob of protoplasm stepped out of a spaceship with a ray gun, automatically we think it's intelligent because it has technology, but we don't understand non-manipulative intelligences. I was debating a whaler in Norway a few years ago, and he said, but Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than human beings, and that's a very stupid thing to say. How can you be so stupid? And I said, well, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with our natural environment. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than people. And he said, well, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than people. I said, George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. Intelligence is the ability to live in harmony with our world.
Thank you. The War That Saved the Whales book you wrote, could you briefly describe what tactics you took from the Confederate raiders used against the Yankee whalers, or just describe one tactic of significance? I enjoyed the documentary.
That was an unknown chapter of the Civil War, is the fact that I called it the War That Saved the Whales because I believe 3 species of whales, humpbacks, grays, and bowheads would be extinct if it wasn't for that conflict, because not supporting the Confederacy in any way, but the Confederate raiders destroyed the Yankee whaling industry. They just destroyed 250 whaling ships, and that pretty much knocked out the whaling industry for the United States. And what I learned from them is that they didn't kill anybody. These raiders would just surface, order everybody off the ship, then destroy the ship. So they never killed anybody. And what I also learned from them was where to hunt whalers, because they were hunting whalers in the same place that we're hunting whalers. But it's a fascinating history because Captain Ian Waddell of the Shenandoah, that was the vessel Shenandoah, went up to the Bering Sea, sank 37 whaling ships in 1 week. And but he did it after the war was over, but he didn't know the war was over. And then suddenly he found himself being chased by the entire United States Navy down the Pacific, across the Indian Ocean, up the Atlantic. He came up surrendered his ship in Liverpool to the British 6 months after the war was over. So it was the last Confederate flag flown, and it was the last shot fired in the Civil War when he fired across the bow of a whaling ship. And then Captain Waddell went on to become a conservation officer in Chesapeake Bay. So, he carried that on from what he was doing. No, by no means were they're there to protect whales. They were there to fight in the war. But one thing happened which inspired me to write the book. The second mate of the Shenandoah boarded a whaling ship off the coast of Russia, Siberia. And the captain said, "Why are you preying upon a defenseless merchantman like me?" And the second mate's answer was, and I quote, "We have entered into a treaty, both offensive and defensive, with the great whales to vanquish their mortal enemies." He said he didn't mean it seriously, but he got the point.
Interesting.
Oh, I was going to say something, Michael, but it's your turn. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Are you writing any more books?
I have a book coming out in July called Hitman for the Kindness Club. And That's based on the fact that I was a childhood member of a group called the Kindness Club, and to be kind to animals. So I had a childhood of sabotaging, hunting, and all these other operations and everything. But a few years later, the woman who founded the Kindness Club, she was the wife of the governor, or the premier of New Brunswick at the time, the conservative premier of New Brunswick, Ida Fleming. And I saw her a few years later after we were fighting the sealers in the East Coast, and she said, "You've become the hitman for my Kindness Club." So that's where that name came from. So it's a collection of stories, everything from rescuing those beavers to interfering with fur auctions in Vancouver, to rescuing rabbits from rabbit farms and different things. So.
Great, thank you.
What kind of response do you expect from the Iceland whalers when you arrive on the JPD #2?
Well, I'm certain they're going to be angry, but we're going to work within the boundaries of both the law and practicality. We're not going into Iceland itself. We're going after the whalers out on the high seas. So there's not much they can do, or at least not legally. And their problem for Iceland is that it's illegal what they're doing. It's in violation of EU law. It's a violation of the International Whaling Commission law. So we're actually interfering with an illegal operation. And any action they take is going to result in putting the spotlight on their illegal activities. I don't think they're going to feel welcome about that. The other thing is, Icelanders in general do not support whaling. They'd rather have whale watching. There's more money to be made from it, and they're just not pro whaling. But the problem is that Christian Lofsson, who's the man who's in charge of that, who owns a whaling company, is one of the wealthiest men in Iceland, has a lot of political control and that. So this is really against Christian Lofsson. It's not really against Iceland.
Thank you. Next question is, could you collaborate with PBS to produce a documentary or series for television?
Funnily, actually, yesterday we met with some people from PBS about doing exactly that. But we're actually in negotiations with about 5 different companies right now to do a TV series. So one of them, it might be PBS, but one of them will be doing it.
Great, excellent.
Have you ever seen Chasing Coral on Netflix? And if so, how did you feel about it?
I did see it. In fact, last night I had dinner with the man who actually directed that film. So it was a very important film, and on a very, very important subject. I mean, coral reefs are dying all over the world. So yes, certainly supporting all those people. And over the last few years, we've got a lot of groups that have come about to cultivate coral, to reintroduce coral and everything, and to find ways to keep it to survive. So a lot of work is being done on coral reefs, a lot of very good work, and that was an excellent film. Yes.
Thank you. I think you've already answered this question, but someone is asking whether you think the current Sea Shepherd is doing a good job.
Well, I'm not actually supposed to answer that question. So,
Okay.
Because they would probably get me for disparagement or something like that. I don't know. They're presently suing us, suing me specifically. So I really can't answer that question.
Okay. So can you please share one thing to us as parent, what we need to teach or educate our kids and children so they would take care and be socially responsible human beings?
I always say nothing. And what I mean by that is it's more important to listen to children, because I think that children have an intuitive understanding of the natural world, and they're kind generally. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to speak to a school in the Queen Charlotte Islands, Haida Gwaii. And the first part of the day was to teach like kindergarten 1-year-olds, the young ones, and then the mid school, and then the and then the seniors. I started with the young children, and I said, how many here speak Haida? Every one of those kids spoke the language. What do you know about whales? Didn't have to say anything, just sat there and listened to all their stories about whales. They knew a lot about whales. By the time we got to mid school, half of them spoke the language, half of them had something to say about whales. But by the time we got to the seniors, nobody spoke the language and nobody gave a damn about whales. So he took all these beautiful children and turned them from these incredibly intuitive, understanding, intelligent creatures into an apathetic bunch of people who couldn't give a damn about anything. educational system right there. And I saw that in that one day in that one school. So I say, let's encourage our children. If they have a passion for something, encourage that passion, and don't try to force them to do this or to do that or do anything like this. So it's a tough being a parent, because you want the best for your child, but at the same time you have to understand that the best thing for a child is what that child thinks is best for that child. And of course, sometimes they don't always know, but you just encourage the little things, this interest, that interest, is it artistic, is it music, is whatever, and just follow it and encourage it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will the Captain Paul Watson Foundation set up state chapters in order to help fundraise through special events and outreach? You can count Vermont in, this person says.
Yes, we're doing that right now. And so it's growing, but we're also doing, we also set up the foundation in Australia and Italy and various places around the world too. So a lot of people are supporting that, and especially in Vermont, so it'd be nice.
Thank you. There's a couple of observations. The Captain Paul Watson Foundation San Francisco is the first organized team in the US, somebody has said. The Cove movie covers this issue in Japan regarding dolphins. And let's see, humans are probably the tragedy of the eons for whales. I'm looking for a question. Why did you close your office here in Woodstock?
Well, I didn't close the office there. I was forced out of Sea Shepherd, and it was a Sea Shepherd office. So, that was the reason for the closure of that.
Okay. Is CITES not binding, or are countries, governments just too impotent to adopt or implement and enforce it?
Well, CITES has, of course, makes the rules and the regulations in that, but the hard part with everything is getting governments to enforce those rules and regulations. It's not just CITES, it's also the International Whaling Commission and various international bodies. Humans are very good at coming up with recommendations and rules and ideas and plans, but just keep in mind, every single recommendation from COP21, the Paris Conference on Climate Change, not one of them was implemented. Every single recommendation from the Rio de Janeiro Conference on the Environment in 1992, nothing was implemented. Lots of promises, but nothing was implemented. The same with the COP26 this year in Egypt, that was, which by the way was sponsored by Coca-Cola, so you could see where that was going. And so nothing is, they just talk about the problem, and that's it. There's too many people talking about the problem, and there's very, very little actual enforcement.
Well, another question, I think the last one here is, will you be using small boats off the JPD in Iceland?
Yes, we have small boats on the John Paul DeJoria too. We'll also be using drones too. We don't have to use helicopters anymore. We find drones are more efficient.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you, Captain Paul, for your work, your inspiration, and for being so generous with your time this evening. Is there anything you wanted to say in conclusion or wrapping up?
Not really. I thank everybody for listening and taking time to watch the film. We will be making more documentaries and television series and everything, and I think that really is the key to getting your message across, because if you don't get it on television, you don't get it in movies, and nobody knows about it. It's hard enough to educate people as it is, so you have to have that camera. So we'll definitely be having film crews on covering everything that we do as we go forward. And I also want to encourage people that if they want to participate physically, that we're always looking for people to join the expeditions. And you don't always have to be, a sailor or have special skills and everything. We always like to have the opportunity to teach, to show people that, they can come on board, learn, and make a difference. This is our planet, and every one of us has, a responsibility to do what we can to protect it.
Thank you. Ginevra, is there anything you wanted to share with the audience about accessing the recording, or anything to finish up?
Sure. The film will be open until midnight tonight. So if anyone missed it, you can still watch it. It'll be in your email confirmation. And I will send out a recording of this event to everyone who registered. So you'll have that to share.
Great. Well,
Thank you so
again,
much, Captain
Paul.
Watson.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks for joining.